Today's presentation is the development and implementation of a dynamic warm-up. Our presenter is Steve Murray, and he is the fitness director and head strength coach and conditioning coach at Macalester College in Minnesota. Steve is in his 6th year as the head coach and for all 21 sports at Macalester College in St. Paul, Minnesota, including the men's and women's soccer programs. He designs and implements the strength, speed, agility, and quickness programs for all varsity athletes. He has over 13 years of experience in the field of strength and conditioning and is certified through the National Strength and Conditioning Association. He attended the University of Minnesota, where he played football, and graduated with a degree in sports management and earned his Master's of Business Administration from the University of Wisconsin. Welcome, Steve, to the presentation.
Thank you, Dave. Today, the goal of this webinar is really to just give you a background and insight on how to put together a proper dynamic warm-up for soccer. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the science behind it, as I want to leave time to give you practical information that you can take away from this and implement right away. I do think it is important, though, that to kind of explain what a dynamic warm-up is. And obviously, it's stated on the slide, but really, a dynamic warm-up, the main piece of it is it's moving the body through ranges of motion. It's active range of motion. Obviously, just like any other warm-up, you're going to increase the heart rate, which is going to increase the body temperature and blood flow. So you're accomplishing the stuff of a regular warm-up, but we're also getting that body ready for the demands of either playing a game or practice. For us at Macalester, with what we do with our dynamic warm-up with men's and women's soccer, to us it's a lot more than just a warm-up. We really want to spend time on the injury prevention, make sure we're maximizing their performance, and also working on proper mechanics. And when looking at these types of things, the one thing we kept coming back to when you look at injury prevention programs, when we've met with different physicians or with our athletic training staff, is repetition. With as a strength coach, with us only getting them one to 3 times a week in the weight room, we needed to find a way where we could get the repetition done every day on some of these injury prevention exercises, on the doing proper mechanics for landing or for jumping or change of direction. And so we saw that our warm-up is an opportunity to do this. So when we do our warm-up, we want to make sure that we're incorporating exercises that work on stability, work on proprioception, on the activation, on the strength and technique. And so for us, in order to accomplish a good dynamic warm-up and accomplish these other things that we feel we want to get out of the warm-up, we want to work on these goals. I apologize real quick, the slide didn't change on me. So we want to accomplish these goals of a general warm-up, working the body through the different ranges of motion, working on stability in the exercise that we choose, the activation, the strength, and technique. Now, as far as how you go through this, the general warm-up needs to come first to get the body ready to go. But as far as incorporating exercises with the range of motion stability, it's kind of up to you on what's going to work best for your program and how you want to put together your warm-up. As we go through these different goals, I didn't include videos on how to go through them. So if there is stuff that you're not sure on what I'm talking about the exercise, you will, after the presentation, be given a link to our website where we have videos of all the different exercises that we incorporate into our dynamic warm-up. You'll also have a link that actually shows you the dynamic warm-up that we used this past fall. Now, we're always changing things and adjusting to what we feel is best. So what we do next year will be similar, but there will be some changes to it as we get into the season. When you're looking at the general warm-up, obviously the most important piece is just getting them warmed up. Just like any warm-up, we want to get them moving. And so for us, when we start our general warm-up, we start right into just doing basic movements in the different planes that they're going to be using when they're playing the sport of soccer. If you have more time, you may start with a 5-minute jog or a two-mile run, or coaches have different ways of wanting to get them warmed up in the start. And that's kind of dictated by how much time you have, how much volume you want to put on their legs. If you're going to be doing a lot of running in practice or conditioning at the end, then you're going to probably want to limit the volume you're putting on their legs when you're getting started. And so for us, our athletes are out there prior to practice starting, kicking the ball around, doing general movement, so they're kind of already starting into their warm-up. So when we start the actual dynamic warm-up, we don't start with a 5-minute jog or any type of run like that. We get right into our movement. So we'll do a forward movement, some type of running movement where we'll incorporate arm movement so that they have to stabilize through the core and the hips. Because a lot of times when you start moving your arms, your legs like to do the same thing. So if you're running with arms across the chest, then they really got to focus on keeping their knees straight ahead, which again will engage those hips and the core. And then we'll get into our lateral movement, a shuffle or a karaoke, get them into some back pedaling, and then some different cuts. And again, this is a general warm-up, so when they're going through this, all this is sub-maximum level. So when they're cutting, it's just real slow working on the technique of it and just getting their body loose, ready to go. And then when you start looking at range of motion, obviously once you get down to general warm-up, then again, however you want to work in your exercises, but our next goal is to work on the range of motion. This is really kind of the main piece of a dynamic warm-up as we talk about moving the body through active range of motion. Just like the general warm-up, we want to start easy and increase. So this starting easy and increasing can be in two different ways. The first way in starting easy is your choice of exercise. And so, starting with a basic exercise, like we start with a Frankenstein walk where they're just walking with their hands straight out front and they're kicking their toe up towards their hand and they're just stepping forward. We'll start something more simple with that, and then we'll start adding more complex stuff where they're going from transitioning from one exercise to the next, like a lunge into a single leg RDL. So we'll start basic on the exercise and then progress through as we get into the dynamic warm-up. But the other piece is also starting easy in the range of motion they're using. So when they first start that Frankenstein walk, their first step as they kick up isn't going to be a huge step trying to kick as high as they can because we're just starting the warm-up. We don't want them to start with a pulled hamstring. So, I always tell our athletes when we're starting the warm-up, work with soccer is, whatever that natural movement allows. Okay, so if it's only halfway up, then that's what it is. And each step, try letting it increase a little bit, but never force the movement or never make it jerky. This is a dynamic warm-up, so when we choose our exercises, again, it's exercises that they're moving through that range of motion. At no point will we add in a static stretch where they're holding it for 5 or 10 seconds. We want to keep them moving. Something I left out in the first slide is when we're looking at this, moving them through ranges of motion. The reason we've moved towards that instead of the static stretching is there's a lot of research out recently that shows static stretching prior to an explosive movement, in practice or a game, it actually limits your ability. So static stretching should really be done on the back end of a practice after a performance, whereas that dynamic movement is actually aids in the performance and is going to help be more beneficial to them for a practice or for a game. And then after the goal of range of motion, then we start getting into stability. And stability for us is just making sure we're consciously incorporating it into the exercises that we choose for our other goals that we're using. So for example, that Frankenstein walk that we do where they're walking forward and they're kicking their hand up or their foot up to their hand, what we're going to do is we're going to coach them up that when they're balancing on one leg as they kick the other leg up. Now when they bring that leg down, we want them to go right into that next step so that they're always only on one leg and they're having to stabilize in that one leg instead of kicking it up and then taking 2 or 3 small steps and then kicking it up again. We don't want them to have that time to readjust. We want them to have to work on stabilizing on that one leg as they go. And we'll focus on making sure they're on the ball of their foot, not standing flat-footed as they're balancing on that one leg. And then, difficulty of exercise as far as, and I talked in the last slide about transitioning from, a lunge into a single leg RDL. Well, again, we're working on stability on that one leg. So they step out in the lunge, and then that front leg, they have to balance on that front leg as they go into a single leg RDL, which single leg RDL, they're balancing on that one leg, kicking the other leg up, and pushing their hip back and kind of forming a T with their body. So they have their base, and then from their heel to their head on that top leg is like the top of a T. And so, again, we're incorporating that stability into the movement. Besides our range of motion exercises, in the next couple of slides, I'm going to talk about, us working on technique of landing or activation in our jumps. Again, we'll incorporate stability in that, whether we're having them land on a single leg or we're incorporating line hops. Again, where they're on one leg, having to jump back and forth and have to work on the stability of the ankle, knee, and the hip. Thing with the stability, and I'll probably say this several times in the slides, is start easy and build up, and also just know the level of athlete you have. Some of the exercises that we have in our dynamic warm-up that we do for stability are going to be too high of a level for an athlete that just is 7, 8 years old, or someone that hasn't done those exercises before and they're even a little older. So start simple, and stability in the start may be just between your dynamic movements. You're having them balance on one foot for 10 seconds, and then they go into their next movement. And then once they get down where they're able to stabilize on one leg without wiggling and moving all over the place, then add moving forward and having to go from a movement into a stability position, and then build up from there. So incorporating stability into all the, into the different exercises, and working up in levels and starting simple, incorporating, one exercise maybe at a time, and then maybe, as you progress in a couple of weeks, make 2 or 3 of the exercises you do have stability in them. But, accomplishing that goal of having them have to balance on one leg, either in place or in a movement. And then from the stability piece, our next goal is we're trying to work on activation. And, and another, piece with our dynamic warm-up, and accomplishing all these goals, it all started with us sitting down with our athletic training staff and figuring out a way that we could cut back on the injuries that we're having with our soccer players. We're just having too many lower joint injuries, and we wanted to find a way to get those cut back. And so when we look at the activation piece, that was one of the big reasons we brought it into the dynamic warm-up, is when we started looking at injury prevention for knee injuries is activating your abductors, your glutes. So we started with that, and so we added in bridges. And the bridge now is you're laying on your back, knees bent, heels on the ground, pushing your hips up. And so we started just with basic bridges, just to work on the activation of the glutes. And then we started adding in bands. And bands are a real easy way to work on some activation with the abductors. You can buy bands online for $2 or $3. They're smaller bands that you either put around their knees or their ankles, and you do movements where they're stepping out or stepping straight ahead, but having to push against the band and keep their knees from coming in. But we started adding in those activation exercises for our abductors, and and later on I'll talk about putting it together, but it's just piecing together where you put those, because obviously it's a dynamic warm-up. We want to keep them moving. So when you do have some of these exercises where they're standing still or laying on the ground, it's important not to put a bunch of those together and split them up. But then we'll also do activation for our ankles, whether it be toe raises or line hops. So we'll work on activation exercises mainly in our glutes and our abductors, and then also in our ankles. But then the other piece of activation that a lot of times gets forgotten is we look at activation as trying to get a muscle firing, but activation is also getting a muscle firing at a higher rate. I mean, part of the reason of the dynamic warm-up is to get them to perform at their potential for that practice or for that game. And so the first time they sprint out on the soccer field, you don't want them, or the first time they sprint, you don't want it to be on the soccer field where they haven't warmed up at all. So we'll do activation exercises of power skips or explosive movements where we build into them and get them firing at a higher level. We'll do accelerations where they'll start in a walk, and then they'll get into a jog, into a run on the first rep. Then the next rep, they'll finish a little higher up on their top end. And then finally, after like the fourth rep, we'll finish with a sprint, or the fifth rep, where that top end of it's a full-out sprint. That way, when they get onto the field, when they want to sprint, they're firing at a higher level and hopefully are running faster than they would have if they didn't. And then they're also hopefully working on some injury prevention with getting them warmed up properly to perform those explosive exercises. And then, the other goal is strength. Now, strength, it varies on the level of athlete and what they're doing outside of playing the sport of soccer. For us, strength isn't a huge component because we get them 1 to 3 times a week in the weight room. In season, they're in there twice. Out of season, they're in there 3 times, and on certain weeks where we have multiple games, we're only in once. But we accomplish our strength in the weight room. But for an athlete who doesn't have access to a weight room, or a young athlete who's just beginning in strength training or hasn't even gotten to using strength training yet, dynamic warm-up is a great way to introduce them to it. First teaching them the proper way to do exercises, incorporating body weight squats, where they're just standing in place, working on the proper technique, getting into a full squat, coming out and doing just a set of 10 as part of the dynamic warm-up. We get a lot of our first-year soccer players come in that we can't even put a weight on their back for squatting for like first two months during the season, because we're having to teach them how to do a proper squat. Whereas if starting at age 10, 11, they were doing body weight squats and working on putting their body through that proper range of motion, then they can take more advantage of the strength exercises down the road. Same with lunges or single leg RDLs, those type of exercises, getting them that base so they can utilize it when they do get to a position where they can use the weight room. But there is a component of strength to it. If an athlete soccer player hasn't done any strength training, body weight squats is going to provide them a basic level of strength. Lunges, single leg RDLs, those exercises are going to give them a basic level of strength. And another one that we like to use, especially in season if we're not getting in the weight room enough, is we'll do partner hamstrings. With soccer, there's always a lot of injuries due to imbalance between the quad and the hamstring. And so, doing exercises where we can strengthen that hamstring is going to help with those injury prevention. So we'll do a partner hamstring. We'll do it in a couple different ways. One, we'll have the athlete lay on the ground on their stomach, and then a partner with their knees bent, heels towards the ceiling, sky, and then the partner will pull down on the heels, and the person laying on their stomach is resisting them pulling it down. We'll work both down and up. We'll also do one where we do a hamstring drop, where they kneel down and partner puts their hands on the ankles and holds them down, as that person who's kneeling slowly controls their torso until it gets to the ground. Now, depending on their strength level, it may be for half a second before they lose control and they just flop to the ground, and then they push themselves up. And for a higher level athlete, they may be able to get halfway down or even further. But the dynamic warm-up is a great way to incorporate strength for those athletes that are not getting in the weight room, or for those that are learning how to properly do exercise that eventually they're going to utilize once they start their strength program. Then the last goal is the technique. And again, this piece, the technique piece, obviously we want to improve their performance, but for us, the technique piece was another huge component in our injury prevention. We looked at research out there and our beliefs on how to prevent injuries. We saw this is a way to do that. A lot of, as far as when they land, we want them to land, when they jump and they land or they change direction and they stop in their body, we want them to always land with their hips back. So we want their hips in a loaded position. We want them on the balls of the feet. Well, we're finding out a lot of our athletes, when they're landing, their knees are shifting forward, or their knees were collapsing in on them. A lot of the issues that lead to injuries we were seeing in the landing technique of our soccer players. So we started incorporating it into our dynamic warm-up. So we use this towards the end of our warm-up, and we'll do basic jumps where they have to land, and for a 3 count, hold the position, whether it's jumping into double leg or onto single leg. We'll do it on vertical jumps, on forward jumps, on lateral jumps. So we'll take, and then we'll do it running, have them run and then stop in a hold, run and change direction and stop. So we'll create a lot of different movements and have to make them have to handle that force in the proper technique. Now, it's a warm-up, so we're not having them do a maximum jump. So we're not worried about them being too fatigued after doing this because it's all sub-maximum jumping and really just working on the form of how to land or how to stop yourself or how to push off to change direction. And, you know, in the 3 years that we've utilized the technique in our dynamic warm-up, we've really seen a lot of improvement on how they are landing or how they are changing their direction. And you know, there's a lot of things that contribute, but we've also seen a fairly big reduction in the injuries that we are having. And also, you know, some coaches want to utilize this time to work on speed. So, you know, if you want to incorporate speed techniques, this would be a place to utilize it. We don't have enough time in this dynamic warm-up to utilize the speed technique, so we don't include it into our technique. So then once you have these different goals I just went over, it's obviously how do you put it together? And when you're looking at putting it together, you know, the first thing is the teaching and the reinforcing it. And to me, when you're looking at the teaching piece is again, and I've said this a few times, is starting basic, making sure that they know how to do the exercise correctly that you're putting in there. Start with just a few and make sure they do those right before you add more. Be realistic with the time you have. If you have 10 minutes, don't put 15 minutes worth of exercise in there where you're just rushing through it and not taking the time to teach them how to do it correctly. And don't make the dynamic warm-up more than it is. A lot of times coaches want to start adding in soccer-specific movements or drills with a soccer ball, and also now the athlete kind of loses track on what they're really trying to work on. So, you know, wait until after the dynamic warm-up to incorporate those different type of drills you want to have. And then the final piece to me is coach. Coach them through the dynamic warm-up. Don't use it as a time for you to get ready for practice or to meet with your coaching staff. Obviously, if that's the only time you have and you have to do it that way, then you do. But do your best to try being active in their dynamic warm-up and coaching them up on how to do things correctly so they're getting the most out of it. They're also going to see how important it is to you that they're doing this. And it's a great way to evaluate your athletes and see where they're at. You know, if you have an athlete that can't balance on one leg for 2 or 3 seconds in a movement, then that's someone you need to give a little more time to, or to give them additional stuff that they can work on. And then as far as your order and time, again, start with the general warm-up. Make sure you're ending with your most complex or explosive exercises after they're warmed up, and then work on having it, you know, build up so that you're ending with an elevated heart rate and you're transitioning right into practice. You know, and that's part of the time pieces. You know, if you know with your practice that you're going to have the first part of practice standing around, whether it's coaching something up or just talking with them, do that first, then go through your dynamic warm-up. Don't just do your dynamic warm-up, then have them stand around for 10 minutes because you're kind of negating what you're trying to accomplish in your dynamic warm-up. The other piece is, and I kind of talked about in the last slide, is, you know, create a dynamic warm-up that fits the time you have, so they're not rushed through it and they're doing it right. You know, and a good dynamic warm-up can range from anywhere from 7 to 15 minutes. Kind of depends on, you know, how much you want to put in there and how much time you're willing to take out of practice for it. Our dynamic warm-up, once they get it down with the first years and everything, takes about 9 minutes. And then, you know, the final slide is know the situation. Know the level of athlete you have as far as the exercises you're choosing, and how many you're choosing and how you're going about coaching it. Know their conditioning level. Our dynamic warm-up, at the pace we go through it and how we do it, if an athlete's not in shape, they can't get through it all. They're too tired. And so knowing their level and not putting in too much or not going through too fast a pace, where now it's actually making their performance worse because they're tired going into practice. Another thing is the temperature. You know, if it's a really hot day out, you're going to want to shorten that dynamic warm-up because we don't want their body temperature to get too elevated and get them into fatigue prior to practice or prior to a game. When you're looking at a game situation, if you have multiple games in a day or in a weekend, you know, incorporating a lot of jumping into your dynamic warm-up in every one, it's going to be too much on their legs. So, or the volume of how much running you do in it is making sure you adjust that warm up. And if you have 2 games in one day or a couple in a weekend, is doing a modified warm up that you're not going to be taxing them too much. And then the other piece is how long are they active. When you look at a game, if you have your whole team do a dynamic warm-up prior to the start of the game, and then you have some of the players that don't get in until late into the first half or into the second half, they should be on the sideline doing a modified dynamic warm-up on their own to get them ready to go. Because a dynamic warm-up and then standing around for 40 minutes or 30 minutes, they need to redo it. So, if you're soccer's nice because some sports like a basketball, you can't really do a dynamic warm-up right next to your chairs. But on the soccer field, there's usually space on the side, and if you can give your athlete 4 or 5 minutes to, notification to get the warm-up in before they go in, that's great. Obviously, it doesn't always work that way, but when you can, try accomplishing that. So right now, I'm going to turn it back over to Dave for any questions.
Thanks, Steve. And before we do get to questions, let me just remind you that if you have a question on anything we've gone through today, please send those in using your chat function on your attendees control panel. As a participant in this series, you can also receive a Play Like Manchester United booklet that includes 9 activities used by their training staff, and that will be sent to you as a matter of course by participating in this session. We'll also be sending out an email tomorrow, or maybe later today, but most likely tomorrow, that'll have a link to the video recording and also links to Steve's email address and the websites he's mentioned. So those will be coming out, the URLs, so you can go on and actually see some video of some of the activities. So Steve, as I transition into the questions, I had a question for you. You talked about the transition from the dynamic warm-up into training and the game. Traditionally, you see that players go back in the dressing room, certainly at a high level, they go back in the dressing room, they have another team talk, and then they come out 5-10 minutes later. Is that something that you see changing, or is that just going to be part and parcel of most sports?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't see that something that's changing, because I've talked with our coaches about it too, and there's certain things as far as a sport that there's ideal and then there's realistic, and it's trying to bring those two together in whatever way we can and get it done, and it may be doing a couple additional things after they come back out, and in some ways athletes already do it. It's not even consciously, but if you notice a lot of times when after they come out of the locker room right before they start, those players that are usually on the field ready to start, they'll do a couple jumps where they drive their knees up, or they'll do some quick butt kicks, or they'll do short sprints. So a lot of it kind of takes care of itself a little bit with the athletes, and it's more just keeping an eye on it. And if you see one of the players that comes out and they're just standing around before the start, is just maybe giving them some suggestions or just making them aware that we've just been sitting for 10 minutes. You might want to do a couple basic movements before you get into actual play.
Thanks. So let's go to some of the questions, and we've got a lot coming in. Charlie, amongst others, has asked about the age that we should be starting the dynamic warm-ups and stretching.
Well, to me, it's as young as we can. I think the younger the athlete, the quicker that they can adapt and get their body to do what we're asking. And the later when I get them at age 18, 19, it takes so many more repetitions to get them to do it right. Now, the thing I learned a few years back when I did a youth soccer camp and did some basic strength stuff with them is an eye-opener to me, as far as how patient you have to be and how more basic you have to be. And so I understand at the youngest level, doing a lot of the exercises we do, they're not ready for it, but two, just keeping them focused and being able to get them to do it right is not the easiest thing to accomplish. So to me, yeah, start them at the earliest age as you can, but keep it simple, and maybe just choosing three things that you want them to work on, and then maybe by the end of the year you build it up to 5 exercises. But I think as far as like, do they at that young age, do they need the full dynamic warm-up to keep them injury-free and stuff? I don't think they need a full dynamic warm-up. I don't know the science behind it, so that's more my opinion. But I do think at the younger the age, we can get them started into the mindset of this is how you get ready for your sport. Then that'll carry through, and it'll be easier as they get older for them to be able to do the exercises that are more complex and to get out of what they need. We still have, with our soccer team where they go play on their own and they don't warm up, and then all of a sudden the next day I have one of them coming down saying I pulled my hamstring. Well, what did you do for your warm-up? Oh, well, we just went into playing. So to me, if we can get them that mindset that this is how they always warm up, then even when they're not with us, they're at least doing some stuff to get themselves ready for playing or for competition.
So great. Christine asked a question, how young should a dynamic warm-up becoming part of every soccer session, which I think you've answered, but part B of her question is it critical for a 10-year-old girls team to ensure that they go through a dynamic warm-up before kicking the ball?
I've seen, and this is more anecdotal, but I've seen a lot more ACL tears at younger ages in girls. And to us, we had, I don't like to admit it, but 4 years ago we had four ACL tears in one season with our women's soccer team, which that's what really initiated this warm-up. And the big thing is like the proper landing technique and the mechanics of pushing the butt back and sitting down. And so especially with the female athletes, the younger age we can get them doing those proper techniques of how to land is going to be crucial in trying to cut down on those ACL injuries or other injuries that happen in the lower limbs. So to me, yeah, if I was a soccer coach and I was working with 10-year-old girls, I would definitely be starting to work on some of those basic movements of the dynamic warm-up, of having them be able to control their body, on one leg, or working on that basic strength of lunges and RDLs for the hamstrings and things like that. I definitely don't think 10's too young of an age, and especially for the type of exercises that you would be starting them with. There's definitely no chance of injury, and since there's no chance of injuries, I'd rather take the time to do it on the chance that it is helping them.
David actually asked a follow-up question to that and asked about the differences between boys and girls, and are there specific exercises you do with boys than girls, and vice versa?
Yeah, there are some differences, but to me, I train them the same in the fact that I have our men do what the women do, because I don't want to take the risk, because there are some men that are going to have some of the same stuff that imbalances that you would see in a woman or in a girl, and so I want our men to do it too, because I don't want them to have a chance of injury. So yeah, there's definitely stuff that we do with our female athletes because of the differences between our men and women, but we have our men do them too, just to be on the safe side, and we're in a situation where we have the time where we can spend it on that. But as girls get older, the difference between the quad and the hamstring, that imbalance increases, and so it's important with our females or girls, women or girls, that we're doing more hamstring work with them. And so definitely getting them started on doing like those partner hamstring drops, or the partner hamstrings where they're laying on their stomach is important. The other piece is, for some reason, and I haven't seen anything that's been posted on why, but it seems to be a lot more of a problem for women to land correctly when they jump and land. And it may be more to just the athletes I've had in here, but typically, more often than not, when one of our male soccer players jumps, they land properly. They sit their butt out, and they're in an athletic position. Their knees aren't going in. But with a lot of our female soccer players, when they come in, when they land, everything shifts forward and their knees come in. And so usually their abductors are a little weaker and their glutes just don't fire right to have them sit back. And again, I don't have the research in front of me or know why that is, but that's another thing that I've noticed, and that's again the reason why we incorporate the working on how to land properly. In the weight room, we do really heavy RDLs and hamstring work to really try compensating for the imbalance that they have. Obviously, if you don't have a weight room, then it's trying to figure out how you can do that in that dynamic warm-up.
Let's take one last question from Natasha, and I want to add a little extra to that. She asks about, are the warm-ups appropriate for other sports? Certainly my addition to that is when do you start introducing the ball, and can the ball be part of the warm-up process so you add some specificity to the warm-up for soccer?
The first piece of it is, yes, it can be used for other sports, and just really where the difference is in the planes of motion that they use and the different movements they have. So if you're working with a tennis player, they have a lot more lateral movement. So the dynamic warm-up is going to incorporate more lateral movement. If in volleyball you're not doing you're not, it's quick movements. You're not doing a lot of, there's no really running in volleyball. So those type of things aren't going to be in the dynamic warm-up. But the overall, what I presented today as far as the different goals, we use those same goals in a very similar dynamic warm-up for volleyball, for men's and women's soccer, for football. We even use it for softball and baseball, but it's a lot more adjusted because they don't have all the multiple cuts and change of direction like you do in the other sports. But yeah, we utilize the dynamic warm-ups with these goals for all of our teams. And then as far as what you were saying, as far as when do you incorporate a soccer ball, to me, if they have all the exercises down, they're doing them correctly, then you can start looking at it. But if you, to me, and this is me not being a sport coach but being a strength coach, to me my preference would be that you wouldn't. But if you were and you wanted to utilize it, to me it'd be making sure that in the start you're accomplishing the main goals through a few exercises, and then switching your gears to adding the ball in for those drills, and knowing that when I add the ball in, my goal is no longer the stability or the range of motion, but my goal is more them using that stability in a soccer-specific drill. So I don't know if that answers it, but so it'd be more making sure you have some, so if you're going to use a soccer ball with stability exercises, make sure that you at least did one exercise working on stability without the soccer ball. And then near the end of your dynamic warm-up, okay, now I'm going to add them stabilizing and balancing on one leg while a partner is passing them a ball.
Thank you, Steve, for